The drama surrounding the Atlanta Dream didn't play out on the scoreboard. It didn't happen in a decisive fourth-quarter run or a clutch shot that silenced the arena. No, it unfolded in the stands. And in the process, it exposed something bigger than a single game of basketball. It exposed the fragile balance between players and fans, between narrative and truth, and between accountability and excuses. What began as a small, almost unremarkable exchange during a playoff matchup erupted into a full-blown spectacle when Alicia Gray pointed into the crowd, signaled to security, and demanded that Indiana Fever supporters be removed. What followed was confusion, contradiction, and a collapse of credibility that no team wants attached to their postseason. It began quietly, almost too quietly for most in the arena to notice. Gray turned her head, locked eyes on a group of fans seated near the Fever bench, and made the unmistakable gesture to the officials and security. Within moments, ushers rushed over, hands on shoulders, guiding a couple out of their seats. The camera caught it briefly before cutting away, but by then, the message had already been sent. A line had been crossed. Something had been said. The implication was serious. In the intensity of a playoff game, where every possession matters and every detail is magnified, the removal of paying fans wasn't just a disruption. It was a declaration that the Dream had been disrespected, that their star had been targeted in some unacceptable way. But here's the problem. When you accuse fans of misconduct, especially on live television, you'd better have the facts straight. And the facts, as it turned out, weren't even close to what Gray's body language suggested. Within minutes, the narrative began to wobble. Security had removed the fans, yes, but eyewitness accounts started leaking almost immediately. People sitting nearby insisted nothing offensive had been shouted. No slurs, no threats, not even a curse word. Just the kind of light heckling you hear in every arena, every night, and every sport. The phrase at the center of the entire fiasco? "You're good, Lex, she's not even trying anymore." Directed at Lexi Hull, not Alicia Gray. Encouragement for one Fever player, not abuse toward an opponent. That single sentence, so ordinary, so unremarkable, became the lit match for an inferno of embarrassment. Because what happened next was even more telling. Security, after hearing the fans out, allowed them to return to their seats. Not hours later, not days later, within the same game. If the alleged offense had been serious, there's no way they walk back in. Security doesn't apologize and hand you your seats back after a slur or a threat. That alone told the whole story. Gray had overreacted, and in doing so, she had dragged her team into a mess of their own making. The fallout was instant. On social media, clips of Gray's gesture spread like wildfire. Fans dissected the footage, froze frames, replayed the removal on loop, and asked the obvious question: why? Why take it this far? Why deflect from the game itself with an accusation that collapsed almost instantly under scrutiny? It didn't take long for the conversation to shift from the supposed bad behavior of Indiana fans to the fragility of Atlanta's players. Suddenly, the Dream weren't the victims of hostile heckling. They were the aggressors in a narrative that looked like a cheap distraction from a poor performance, and poor it was. Because while Alicia Gray was pointing fingers into the stands, the Fever were pointing at the scoreboard. Indiana, battered by injuries and written off by most, were busy making history. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. On one side, a team unraveling under pressure, spinning a story that didn't hold up. On the other, a group of players short on bodies but overflowing with resilience, using every ounce of energy to claw their way back into a series that could have ended that night. The divide between drama and determination was impossible to ignore. For the Dream, the timing of the fiasco couldn't have been worse. This wasn't a meaningless regular season game in February. This was the postseason. Elimination basketball, stakes higher than they'd been in nearly a decade for Indiana. Game 2 at Gainbridge Fieldhouse was everything the Fever had been building toward. Their first home playoff appearance since 2016, a packed house in red Now You Know shirts. The roar of a fan base desperate to believe again. This was the night Indiana had waited years for. And nothing, not injuries, not narratives, not misdirections, was going to spoil it. Because here's the reality. Indiana wasn't just undermanned, they were gutted. Caitlin Clark, the rookie sensation who had transformed the franchise overnight, was out. Sophie Cunningham sidelined. Sydney Colson gone. Chloe Bibby unavailable. Even Ari McDonald, another key piece, was on the shelf. That's 5 rotation players, including the one superstar who had single-handedly doubled viewership and ticket sales for the league. By every logical measure, Indiana should have folded. But instead, they came out swinging. From the opening tip, you could see it. The urgency was there. Coach Stephanie White's words before the game weren't just motivational filler. She had demanded desperation, effort on every 50-50 ball, attention to every defensive rebound, and for 40 minutes her team delivered. The Fever didn't just play basketball that night. They embodied survival. They fought for every loose ball, rotated faster than in Game 1, boxed out with fury, and refused to let Atlanta dictate the tempo. It wasn't just the players on the court either. Caitlin Clark may have been in street clothes, but she was visible on the bench, standing after every defensive stop, cheering louder than anyone. Her energy radiated across the team. Rather than sulk about her absence, the Fever fed off her presence. And as the minutes ticked away, that energy transformed into results. Aaliyah Boston, steady as ever, went to work in the paint, showing why she's already one of the most reliable post players in the league. Kelsey Mitchell, often overlooked in national conversations, erupted for 19 points, including 4 daggers from beyond the arc that ripped the heart out of Atlanta's defensive schemes. Aerial Powers flexed her strength with an N1 finish that ignited the crowd. Natasha Howard quietly controlled the flow, putting up 12 points while altering shots on the other end. And Lexi Hull, the very player fans were trying to encourage during the incident, stamped her mark on the game with a buzzer-beating 3 that sent Gainbridge into chaos and effectively crushed Atlanta's spirit. That single sequence, Boston muscling her way to a basket, a steal by Shaw Petty and Hull's deep 3 at the horn, flipped the game on its head. Up until then, the dream had hovered within reach, the margin never ballooning enough to feel safe. But when Hull's shot dropped, when the arena detonated in noise, you could see it in Atlanta's body language. Shoulders slumped, eyes glazed. A 12-point hole suddenly looked like a canyon. Indiana smelled blood, and from that moment they never looked back. By the final buzzer, the scoreboard read 77-60. A blowout. A statement. A franchise-redefining moment. And the optics couldn't have been more brutal for Atlanta. Their star had pointed at fans, tried to rewrite the narrative, and failed. Meanwhile, the Fever had written a story that will live far longer than this controversy. They snapped a playoff drought, energized a fan base, and reminded everyone what resilience looks like. The statistics told their own tale. Atlanta shot a miserable 37.9% from the field. They managed just 5 of 19 from 3. Their free throw attempts barely cracked double digits. Gray and Howard, their supposed cornerstones, combined for a pedestrian 19 points. On the other side, Indiana spread the wealth. Boston with 15, Mitchell with 19, Howard with 12, Hull with 9, and relentless defense. Even rookie Michaela Timpson chipped in 9 points with poise that belied her experience. It wasn't one superstar carrying them. It was everyone, together, playing desperate, hungry basketball.